Welcome, students of NKT. This is another episode of Test, Don't Guess. I'm really excited to have on today Jory Serota. He is a massage therapist, yoga instructor, also an NKT instructor in New York. He owns his own studio out there, Woodstock's Mobility Center, and Applied Yoga Integration. Jory, thanks for being on today.
Happy to be here, Brandon.
Jory, I want to get started with your beginnings in NKT. When did you first hear about NKT, and what was it like when you first kind of experienced it and learned about it?
I found NKT in 2009, actually. I was living in Marin County, which is the same county that David lives in. And I had my office inside of a racket club. I had worked for the last 6 years on the professional tennis circuit. And I had been in Marin for probably about 2 years, just establishing myself, developing my practice. And I kept having clients that were mentioning this guy, David Weinstock. And for about, I don't know, something like 3 or 4 months or something, he and I were sharing clients back and forth. And then I had one of the people who I had seen regularly over the last 2 years come to see me, and she had a hamstring injury. And after about 2 or 3 visits of working with her, I couldn't get her better. And in the middle of the session, that third session, she goes to me, she goes, "I've heard of this guy, David Weinstock. Should I go see him?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't exactly know what's going on. Go see him, find out." So she goes and she sees him, and she comes back to me about 2-3 weeks later. And I'm like, "How you doing?" She's like, "I'm better." I'm like, "You're better?" She's like, "I'm better." I'm like, "Well, what the hell did he do?" And she's like, "I have no freaking idea." And I said, "Okay, well, that's kind of interesting." So, she left my office. I had his phone number. So I gave him a call, and I was like, "David, this is Jory Serota. We've shared some clients." He's like, "I know who you are." And I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Well, you want to go out to lunch or something?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Let's go for a hike." I was like, right on. So, I met up with him probably it was that weekend or something. We went for like a 4.5 hour, 10-mile hike.
Oh my gosh.
It was like 2 people who were supposed to meet, who were like brothers in another life or something, whatever, getting together. And we downloaded life stories. He told me all about NKT, and he's like, "Listen, man, you should come take NKT." And I was like, "No, thanks." And he's like, "No, really, because look, this and that, and then you can get to the root cause of dysfunction, and you're working with the brain." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've taken enough courses, man. I'm done." So I know this is a long story, but we said goodbye. And over the next 2 or 3 weeks, he called me at least once a week for those weeks, or sent me a Facebook message or email. And he's like, "You should come take the course." And finally I surrendered, and I took it. And that was the end of, that was a whole new chapter in my life.
Wow, that is super interesting. I have not heard a story like that before. That's fascinating. Wait, so that was back in 2009, did you say?
That was 2009.
Okay. Wow, so yeah, that was kind of a long time ago. Wow.
Yeah. When I took the course, it was pretty much only local people in the Bay Area that were coming. Mm-hmm. There was probably 13 or 14 people. I'm not 100% sure there was a book yet.
Okay.
There's been a lot of different incarnations of the course since that time. Yeah.
Okay, so then what was your progression like from there? Since, I would assume there was only just kind of level 1. It was just the course. There wasn't all these different courses that there are now, and no book. You had a different progression from most people now, learning the new material. What was that process like?
It was really challenging, actually. And I have a bit of a funny story about it as well, which is when I took it that weekend, I only took, I think it was Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday was how it was organized at this point. And I took Friday night and Saturday. And I didn't even take the Sunday class,
Okay.
Which David was okay with at that point. And, you know, over the next couple months, I started practicing. I started really getting it, or started really liking it, I should say. And, you know, I would have the opportunity to get to a study group about every month with David. That was before Thomas took over the Bay Area study groups. David was still teaching them. You know, I did not make the study groups a priority in my life at that point, which I think is, you know, a real mistake that a lot of beginners also make when they are interested in learning NKT, is they don't actually make the study group a priority, which is really such a good place for us to learn. But I went to a couple study groups, and after, you know, I don't know, 2 months or something like that, I still hadn't taken the third part. I still hadn't fully completed level 1. And I was pretty much taking every one of my clients and I was testing their glutes. You know, I was like, listen, I'm going to try to get this stuff. I'm not going to jump in too quickly into it. I know how to test a glute. I know what the antagonists of the glute are. That's the first place I'm going to look. I'm going to test the glute. If the glute doesn't work, I'm going to iliacus. I'm going to psoas. You know, maybe I'll look at the rectus femoris detachment on the AIIS. You know, if that doesn't work, maybe I'll go to calf. You know, and so that was the extent of my, you know, real understanding. But so many people have weak glutes and so many people have back pain and hip pain that I was getting results. And so, you know, I'm starting to pick up the material and I'm starting to have a couple decent, you know, experiences with clients. And so I write David and I'm like, man, I'm kicking butt, dude. You know, I'm testing glutes. I'm turning them on. I'm really loving this stuff. He's like, great. You know, David, he writes me, you know, 2 words back in his response. So guys, don't feel upset if you ever write him and he writes you 3 words. He does it to all of us.
Yeah.
And so about 4 days later, David writes me again and he says, that's great. You're working. I want to come in for a session. Oh, I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah,
you know, here we go. Boss is coming in. Like, let's see what happens, you know? So he comes in, you know, and he's like, my forearms hurt. And I'm like, you fucking bastard. Like, I'm not doing anything with the forearms. Come on. You know, what am I supposed to do? He's like, yeah, it's tight here. You know, it's tight here. I've got a little thing in the shoulder, you know? And so like I think like I test as QL for some reason, you know? I might have gotten to like an anterior delt or a middle delt to test. But you know, that amount of testing took about 6 to 7 minutes. And at that point I had no freaking idea what to do. My face like got red. I started freezing up. And for the next like 45 minutes, I just wound up massaging his forearms. You know, and so like that's actually my first like real experience, like being challenged with my NKT skills. Mm-hmm. You know, and fortunately, like David's like a compassionate, kind human being, you know, and like he was caring with me. He wasn't like, you fucking suck. Get the fuck out of here. You know. Now that it's been, you know, 8 or 9 years, he has free reign to say that to me whenever he wants.
And that is such an interesting story with him. Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I guess, I mean, just to continue, like from that point on, like, you know, I kept in really good communication with him. I finished, you know, that third section that I had to do of level 1. And when I was there, because I wasn't there for the whole weekend, I had just come for Sunday. And maybe I might have gone for both days. I can't remember. But as students were, you know, having trouble with the material, you know, that was being presented, there was actually one or two assistants lacking. You know, like there was two or three tables that didn't have assistants. And so David saw me like explaining the process to everybody. And, you know, to the students that were taking class. And I don't even know if he remembers this or not, to be honest. But he pulls me aside in the middle of the class and he stands like literally like almost like chest to chest, like we're right next to each other. And he looks at me and he goes, "You know your future with this stuff, right?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "You're meant to be a teacher of NKT."
Wow.
And I was like, okay, you know? And so, you know, I mean, the deal was kind of sealed at that point. You know, from there, I was full on in. I started assisting courses. I was going to study groups. He and I started trading sessions. I would work on him. He'd work on me. And, you know, it probably took me a good year, to be honest. You know, I was not the quickest person with this. But once that year was up, I was like, I got it down.
Yeah. So, okay. So that was like 2010, 2011-ish. That's kind of when you started to feel confident using NKT.
Yeah, probably by the end of 2010. You know, and I mean, I don't remember when the advent of Facebook was for us and when the scholars page, but there is no scholars page at that point. So, yeah.
Wow. So, okay, I didn't know that you had been doing this for so long, but in all this time of you doing NKT and being able to work so closely with David, what do you think maybe was like the hardest thing for you to grasp onto? What was just like, I mean, you know, you felt like you got the glutes right away and then the forearms like kind of blew your mind and that was a hard thing to get into. What were some more things like that you just said, oh my gosh, I'm stuck at this, or this really kept me from moving forward? Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything. You know, I mean, the whole concept of MKT and the whole concept of understanding, you know, motor control and how it works was really new and foreign to me. And, you know, as much as like through my yoga practice, I could feel like, wow, my knee's hurting, but I just opened up my hip and now my knee's better. You know, it was still hard for me to wrap my head around in a bodywork context. The place where the pain is not necessarily the place that's causing the pain. It's not necessarily, I should say, the source of the pain. And so that took me a long time because from a massage training, and I even, you know, I apprenticed with physical therapists for 5 or 6 years. You know, even with their paradigm and their way of thinking, okay, your shoulder hurts, let's rub your shoulder, you know? Or, you know, your forearm hurts, let's rub the forearm. Let's not, you know, if you have a little like lateral epicondylitis, let's massage that and do some eccentric training for that, as opposed to maybe the supraspinatus is not functioning properly. You know, maybe there's some sort of instability that's taking place in the shoulder and some other part of the body that's causing this. That took me a really long time to start to get my head around.
And then, I mean, you're an instructor now, and all this time that you've been learning and working with people, I mean, it sounds like you were already into that instructor phase just right off the bat, as David was explaining with you. What are big mistakes maybe you see people nowadays make? Are they kind of the same, or what are things that, you know, you always teach people and it just seems like you come back to certain points that are just really hard for people to grasp onto?
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing that I think is actually really important. The skills that you have when you come to class, you should hold on to and keep and continue to develop those as well. You know, people get so blown away with the whole paradigm shift of NKT and the muscle testing and the motor control that, you know, they think, oh shit, I've been a horrible therapist for these last years. No, you haven't been. You've been a great therapist and you're on a particular path of developing and deepening your understanding. But second, they get so enamored with the muscle testing that they just start muscle testing this and muscle testing that and muscle testing this and muscle testing that. And they forget to actually do any sort of release work to any tissue that is stuck or is causing some of these other faulty motor control patterns to be present. And so I tell people, listen, who you are and the skills that you have are great. People are coming to you because they want to be out of pain. You've been getting people out of pain for however many years you've been in practice, and you're looking to get more information and have a new approach because you're not getting everybody out of pain. Well, nobody's getting everybody out of pain. You know, the healing that takes place in somebody is a set of causing conditions that is inside of them and interrelational with the therapist that they're working with. You know, there's nobody that's this just magic fucking tool and button that you press the button and bam, you're better. Right. You know, their brain has to be ready. Their body has to be ready. Their emotional connectivity has to be available. You know, all of these things have to happen. And so, you know, when I teach and when I talk to people who are just learning NKT, I say, listen, first, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You know, there's a girl who just took my course in Charlotte, and she wrote me a couple days after Charlotte or a week after Charlotte. And she's like, I'm so unhappy. This woman came to me with neck pain. I couldn't get her out of pain. I feel awful. Like, I saw somebody yesterday I couldn't get out of pain. You know, so, you know, like, no, just because you're a master of NKT also doesn't mean that you're going to get everybody out of pain in one freaking session. You know, so don't be too hard on yourselves. Everybody learns at their own pace. Look to support from the community. Go slowly. Trust the skills you have already because they're good. And when you're doing all the muscle testing, remember, and this is a really important point actually, anybody can turn muscles on and off. Anybody can find an inhibited muscle and turn it back on. That's something that we do. But our job as therapists is to get people out of pain. And so don't test too much. Don't test fucking everything. Test a couple things that you think are related to the pain experience that this person is having. Find a TL or two TLs or something that turn it back on. Do your manual work, or if you're a Pilates person or whatever you are, do your stretching or do, you know, whatever it is that provides the release. Do the release once you've made those couple connections, and then get your people off the table and check and see how they feel again. You know, the moment that we try to do too much, the moment that we're like, you know, I don't know, the moment that we're just digging and digging and digging and digging and digging without stopping for a second to see the progress that we've made, then, you know, we're not appreciating, and I don't know the word, we're not resting in the fact that we are making changes. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
Yeah, wow, those are great reminders. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear, what did your practice look like a little bit? I mean, you sort of explained a tiny little bit, but give us more of a snippet. What did your practice look like before NKT, and how has it kind of changed now that you're doing NKT? What are some big things that, like, oh, I used to do these, you know, I would never do those again? And then kind of like what you were saying, you know, you still want to retain a lot of those good skills that you have before NKT. What are some of those skills that you still have retained and still use today? And maybe you've just been able to amplify those skills even more, bringing in NKT alongside of those.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I first found NKT, I considered myself a sports massage therapist. I had been working on the tennis tour for about 3 or 4 years. You know, working with the players, helping them get, you know, recover from injury and be able to play their next match. You know, and I had my private practice. Most of my people were, you know, coming in shorts and a t-shirt, but I probably still had 20 or 30% that were undressing and getting, you know, deep tissue sports massage. And I hated it. You know, I became a massage therapist in 1999. By, you know, 2004 or 5, I was like, I don't want to be a massage therapist. Like, I like working with people, and I like, you know, I like trying to get people better, but like, hope this doesn't come out the wrong way. I felt like a whore, you know, I felt like a slut. I felt like people were coming like, oh, just rub me, you know? And I'm like, that's not meeting my potential at all, you know? And so, you know, and even though I was working with athletes, and even though like I was known as, you know, the good sports guy to go to, like, I wasn't happy. And so when I found NKT, I just really started making the transition quick. You know, I was one of those people that I was like, listen, life is not about pleasing other people. Life is about making myself the most fulfilled and happy that I can possibly make myself. And if that means that I'm going to lose a couple clients for a couple months, cool. Because like this is about, you know, this is about me, you know, and the only way that I can really help anybody else is if I truly listen to what my needs are and what my desires are. And when I do that, then I'm going to be in harmony with myself, with the universe, whatever. Then I'm going to actually be able to help people. And I was very, very, very confident that even if I lost a couple people for a couple months, as long as I continued to hone my skills as an NKT therapist, my practice was going to double. And it did. My practice pretty much doubled.
Wow.
You know, everybody came in for NKT. I had one person who still came for massage, and I just let it be. I grandfathered him in. He's the United States record holder between the ages of 55 and 60 for the 5K and the 10K. And I was like, you know, man, if you want to keep coming in and getting massage, I'm going to charge you a little bit extra, but like that's cool. So, you know, he was the one person that I kept in the massage, but everybody else I transitioned. And in the span of about a year, I wound up leaving the racket club. I was done with the racket club. I opened up a clinic with a friend of mine. My office was probably a minute and a half drive from David's office.
Oh, wow.
I called it Marin Sports Therapy. And, you know, I went from having, you know, I don't know, 10 to 12 clients a week and charging, you know, 105 or 110 bucks to having 20 to 25 people a week, a wait list, and charging 150 bucks.
Wow. Busy practice.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So now today, I mean, now that you're in New York, I mean, you're pretty much, you know, teaching classes, and I would assume doing basically all NKT type work.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, the big thing for me is I'm not built to do 25 sessions a week. I don't like it. You know, I love working with people. It provides me a tremendous joy, and God knows I love NKT. But my practice right now is I won't work on more than 12 people in a week. I have quite a large office, which is awesome. It's by far the nicest office I've ever had. I have, you know, enough space for my electric table. There's a little Pilates equipment because I share the room with a woman who does Pilates. And there's tons of space for movement. And so, you know, every single person that comes to me gets NKT. No doubt about it, independent of what you're coming to me for. There's a couple people that come to me and they want to have a yoga private or just a straight up movement session, you know, which I love. You know, I mean, I'm a huge advocate of, you know, all the tissue work that we do is not going to fully heal someone's pain if they still stand like this, you know, in their life. You know, we have to learn how to get them to get the chest to lift and the shoulders to drop. You know, we have to, you know, work to retrain some movement. So I love doing movement sessions with people, private yoga sessions. But even within those, I still do NKT. You know, I'm still like, hold on one second. That doesn't look right to me. Let's break this out a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, but most of my sessions are NKT, and that's the predominance of what I do.
Yeah, that's great. And then how much time do you actually spend doing the NKT? Is it like the whole time or just a little bit, a few minutes, a few tests? I mean, how much of the NKT concepts and practice and tests do you actually do in your session with people?
it's a fair bit of the session. People come in and, we'll talk for anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes in that first session. I'm doing the whole intake. I've got my little computer system that I'm putting everything into. And we're also just kind of feeling each other out, not feeling each other up. But horrible. That was for you, David, if you ever watched it. If only you guys knew some of the jokes that we were making at level 3 this weekend in New York City.
Oh, there's lots of good jokes. There's lots
of good jokes. So yeah, we're feeling each other out. We're getting a sense of each other's energy. I think a big part of the healing process is making sure that there's a good resonation between the therapist and the client. So, we go through that, and then I put them through a movement assessment. I have a little movement assessment that I've created based off of my 20 years of yoga experience. I've also taken SFMA. I sometimes do a little bit of the top tier of SFMA. And after the movement, assessment, and after the intake, that process, and this I find very important, that process of the intake and the movement assessment, during that, I am internally developing a theory of what I think is going on for that client. And once I have that theory, okay, they've talked to me about their shoulder pain. When they take the arm up, it's stuck right around here. They don't have full humeral flexion. Okay, I'm just putting that into the banks. Maybe the deltoid's not working. Maybe there's some facilitation of the upper fibers of the lat. Maybe there's something in subscap that's pulling everything down. I'm forming some sort of theory hypothesis. And at that point, I put them on the table and I put that theory to test. The whole thing with NKT is our job is to develop a theory and then challenge that theory. The title of this podcast, the title of your podcast is Test, Don't Guess. That theory is a guess. It's an educated guess, but it's still a guess. Our job at that point is to put these people through the testing to see if our theory is right or if our theory is wrong. And I had a woman yesterday who I was just so freaking sure that the omohyoid here was facilitated and was not working. And as I put her through the test, it just was not the situation at all. I was completely wrong. And I tell people this, and I sometimes tell people this when I teach, but there was a huge change that took place in my personal practice. And this was even after I moved offices. There's a huge change that took place in my private practice when I started fully trusting the technique and not trusting my theory. So, I highly recommend people, if you believe in NKT and if you trust NKT and you feel you're somewhat proficient in your ability to test and your ability to find what the facilitator is, to trust that and follow that. And so that's what I do. And those are my sessions. My sessions they're 50 minutes to an hour. There's the intake, there's the movement assessment, there's the NKT and the corrections. I will normally have someone get up off the table 2 or 3 times. Okay. And I will do that. So I'll make it a big correction. And then I'll say, okay, get up. How does it feel? And then they'll say, it doesn't feel any better, or they'll say it feels a lot better, and it's all just about feedback. It's all just about, okay, did what I just do actually work, or did I miss something? Because again, it all comes back to, we can all turn muscles on and off, but are we finding the relationships that allow this person to get better?
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm interested in hearing how you explain NKT to people when they come in, and kind of your initial process with NKT. Since you use it so much, you're an instructor, you're doing it with, it sounds like everybody, at least a little bit. When they first come in, do they kind of know what you're going to do? Sometimes you have referrals and people already know who you are and, oh, he does this NKT stuff, but how do you kind of explain to them, yeah, this is what this is what I'm going to do? And then are there like certain, testing protocols you start with, or maybe that you don't start with people? What's kind of that first moment of doing the NKT like?
Sure, sure. Well, you know, I mean, I have relatively the same thing that I say to people every time. You know, once I get them on the table, I say to them, and I think there's a video of me explaining this on the scholars page. I'm not quite sure. But I say to people, I say, listen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a series of manual muscle tests. I'm not looking for brute strength. I'm just looking to see if you can meet my pressure. I'm just looking for that neurological connection. And every test we do will be done on an exhale through your mouth. And, you know, if they ask me before, if they ask me more, if they ask me what NKT is, I pretty much say, you know, NKT, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you these manual muscle tests. I'm looking for the areas of your body that aren't functioning properly. When we find areas that aren't functioning properly, we have a particular set of protocol, a unique protocol to figure out why they're not functioning. Often this is because there's something that's not working well and there's something that's overworking. So my job is to make a connection between those two. Get the thing that's overworking to downregulate. Get the thing that's overworking to not work so much. I don't even use the word downregulate for these people. You know, get the thing that's overworking to stop working so much, and get the thing that's not working to start working more. And then we create more of a harmony between these structures. And honestly, I would say less than 1% of people don't understand that.
Wow.
You know, even if they don't fully grasp it, people understand that we compensate. People understand that some things are tight. You know, people actually understand that some things don't feel like they're strong enough. You know, they don't actually understand what strong means, that it could mean, you know, there's a neurological deficiency. But when you talk to people in really what could be considered the first grade way or the second or third grade way, it's actually really deep. You know, so saying we're looking for things that aren't working, and when we find things that aren't working, we're looking for something that's overworking, something that's too tight or stuck. They get that. So that's what I do.
Yeah, that's great. And in a session, if you're, you know, I mean, maybe you don't have this quite as much now, but maybe back to those earlier days when you were a little bit less confident and you're doing NKT with somebody, did you have any kind of good resets if you got confused? If you said, oh, I did this test and wait a minute, now I don't know, what was the inhibitor? Was this weak in the clear? Was it not? What did you have things that kind of reset yourself that alleviated confusion, maybe something you'd have the client do or you would do to kind of clear your mind and be like, okay, what do I know and what am I doing again? Did you have any good things like that?
Yeah. You know, and generally, and what I tell to all the students, you know, that I get to teach that, you know, are going through the process, you know, I say, listen, if you forget something or you can't find a facilitator or you're poking around this and that and you don't know what's going on, whatever limb you're testing, just, you know, gently put it down, walk out of the room and never come back. You know, because it alivens that sense of humor, you know. Really, I mean, that's a joke, obviously.
Yeah.
They'll never know. You just don't come back. They'll never know. They'll leave money on the table. They'll come back next week. It's great. We're all going to fuck up. You know, we're all going to not be completely sharp at different times. We're going to forget stuff. We have people who have a whiteboard on the wall and they just write what's happening there and that helps them remember. I know there's a couple of people in Cleveland that actually do that, and I think there's many NKT therapists that do that. I've never done that. For me, it's always been pretty integrated, and I've really remembered this stuff. I have a good memory for this kind of stuff. But I think that the biggest thing to do, and the most important thing, is just to be real. You know, people have more understanding than I think that we give credit for. You know, and if you're a total newbie and you've explained this to your clients and you said, hey, listen, I'm going to be working this way. I'm still learning. You know, if you get stuck, say, you know, all right, now I'm stuck. You know, and you have the option there. If it's a paying client and you feel comfortable to just continue. If it's a paying client and you don't feel comfortable, go back to what you know. NKT takes time to master. And it's not that anybody's ever going to be a full master. You know, nobody here knows everything about the way the body works. You know, if you ask the highest level doctor in the United States, why does someone get a frozen shoulder? They're going to say, well, it has something to do with estrogen and women that are over 50. They could have taken a fall, you know, blah, blah, blah. Well, this guy's 36 and nothing happened and he can't lift his arm and his whole capsule is locked in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's nobody who's going to completely and fully understand the body. I mean, even if you ever like read some of the scriptures of the Buddha from 2,500 years ago, if you read the Pali Canon, the Buddha had his main assistant was his cousin, actually, a guy named Ananda. And there is written parts of the scripture that where the Buddha says, Ananda, can you please massage my back? I'm having a little pain. You know, so even the guy who attained, you know, everything, the full enlightenment, the whole kit and caboodle, he's not getting reborn again. He's all good. Still had physical issues and things he wasn't able to understand, you know? And so I just tell people, be as real as you can. If it's a paying client and you're stuck and you feel uncomfortable being open, if you're a massage therapist, go back to massaging them. If you're a Pilates person, go back to training them. Maybe 30 minutes down the road in your training, you're going to find something and be like, oh, wait, I got to test that. And then you go back to that, you know? So be bold, be courageous, go for it. And if you get stuck, trust the skills that you already have.
No, that's great. Well, Jory, it's been super awesome. I just got a couple more questions I want to ask you.
Sure.
One, are there any outside resources like great books that you read or, you know, things you listened to or things that you experienced that you thought, oh, wow, once I learned this and I understood these concepts, that totally helped me understanding NKT concepts, that kind of, you know, motor control or functional movement or anatomy or different things like that. Any good resources of learning that you could recommend to people?
I don't. I don't, but I do.
Okay.
I'm not the biggest reader in this this phase of my life. I've got a couple things that I'm looking into, even the last several years, you know, but sitting down and reading some of this really heady, intellectual, you know, scientific shit, like I'm there for a couple minutes and then I'm like thinking about the baseball game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't land on that. But the biggest thing that I can say to learn NKT and to learn how motor control works is to learn as much about your own body as you possibly can.
Yeah.
If you ask David how he found NKT, he will very happily tell you he found NKT playing with himself. Now, he's making a joke there. But
I hear that joke.
Right, you've heard that joke, yeah. You know, but it was actually through through the investigation of his own body that he was able to understand, you know, how the motor control works. It was through working with somebody who was testing him and seeing when things didn't work, you know, and then seeing how they would turn back on that he started to create NKT, you know, and what was I going to say? I was going to say something about that. Oh, and so in that regard, if you are wanting to learn NKT, you're a new level 1 person, you're stoked with it, you feel that there's something of value here, and there is a community around you, don't just go to study groups. Go get 1 or 2 sessions a month from an advanced practitioner and start to feel what an NKT, what a flowing, fluid NKT session is on your body. Because when you can feel that, then that automatically gets ingrained into your being. And from there, you're actually working from a place of understanding. So, you know, getting as many sessions, getting more sessions, seeing how it works with you, seeing how it helps you, I really think that that's one of the best things that people can do in terms of learning NKT.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you kind of already answered this, but I always do like to end with this one last question of just if you have any last comments, last words of advice. I mean, you've already given a lot of really good advice in this talk, but if you have any final thing that's just your last thought that any NKT student just has to know or do this, or even just in their practice or life in general, what's the last word of advice you can give everybody?
Trust yourself. Trust that you're good with your skills. You're a good person, unless you know that you're not. Then you'd be me. Know that you're a good person. Know that you have skills. Know that however old you are, you've been developing these skills for your whole life. Your job with NKT and as a body worker is to be as sensitive and connected to the person that you're working on. Not taking on their shit, I'm not saying that, but sensitive to what their needs are, sensitive to what their movement patterns are, sensitive to how they're breathing, sensitive to what their emotion or anxiety or stress levels are, sensitive to where their pains are. Be aware of the person you're with. Try to clear yourself out of the mix as much as you can. Becoming a skilled manual muscle tester means that you are able to take your own nervous system out of the situation. So the more that you can do that, the more that you can stay connected to this person there. Keep developing your skills. Don't be too hard on yourselves. We all have failures. We all have successes. Be stoked about the successes. Acknowledge them. So many people in this world on so many levels, not just with NKT, but with their own personal psychology. When they start doing better, they're afraid that they're not going to do better, or whatever that weird societal mental bullshit is. And they don't acknowledge that, hey, right now I feel awesome, or hey, right now I feel calm, or whatever it is, hey, I just got that person better. Acknowledge that. The whole concept of Buddhism, is that the glass is not half full. The glass is half full. The glass is also half empty. You're looking at everything. You're looking at the whole gamut of it. So just be honest with yourselves. Continue to learn. Continue to trust yourselves. You guys all rock. We're here for you. You can talk to me. You can talk to any instructors. You can talk to Brandon. You can talk to anybody that you resonate with. In the NKT community, it doesn't have to be me, Brandon, David, Eric, Thomas, whatever. It doesn't have to be any of us. If there's someone who you feel connected with, that might be the person that you can learn from. So reach out to them. We're a fun, loving, kind, and compassionate community. So use us.
Yeah. Jory, I love it. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. Really an honor and a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for just all of your wisdom, your advice, your experiences. It's been great to hear all this. So thank you.
Thanks. Same here. Very much, Brandon. We'll see you.